I never thought the smell of fresh-baked cinnamon rolls would make me sick to my stomach, but here we are. My name's Tommy, and I've spent the last 15 years building something I thought was solid. Not just my business, a chain of automotive repair shops across San Antonio, but my marriage to Camilla. We had 2 kids, a beautiful house in the hills, and what I believed was a partnership built on honesty. Turns out, I was the only one being honest. It started with something small. Too small, really, which is why it bothered me so much. October had rolled into San Antonio with that crisp edge that makes you remember Texas actually has seasons. The mesquite trees were starting to turn, and the evening air had that particular quality that made you want to sit outside with a beer and watch the sun go down. I was reviewing our joint account statements, something I did quarterly, just to keep track of our finances, when I noticed charges that didn't make sense. $300 at a boutique hotel downtown. Not our usual spots. Not even close to the practical chains we'd use for the occasional staycation. Then another charge, $200 at some upscale restaurant we'd never been to. The kind of place that required reservations weeks in advance, and had sommeliers who looked down on you if you couldn't pronounce French wine regions correctly. Camilla ran her own pastry business from our industrial kitchen setup at home. She was talented, no question. Her desserts were all over Instagram, and she had contracts with half the wedding planners in the city. Her tres leches cake had been featured in Texas Monthly. Her macarons sold out within hours whenever she posted them online. But these charges? They were on days when she'd told me she was doing consultations or deliveries. Days when she'd kissed me goodbye in the morning and come home smelling like vanilla extract and powdered sugar, complaining about difficult clients or challenging recipes. I pulled up the calendar on my phone and cross-referenced the dates. October 3rd. She'd said she was meeting with a bride in Alamo Heights about a 5-tier wedding cake. October 9th, supposedly delivering samples to a corporate client downtown. October 15th, a consultation dinner with a potential investor interested in franchising her dessert concept. All lies, apparently. Or at least, not the whole truth. I didn't want to be that guy. The paranoid husband who sees shadows everywhere. My first marriage had ended badly. My ex-wife had cleaned me out emotionally and financially before I even realized what was happening. She'd been cheating with her personal trainer for 2 years, draining our accounts to pay for their little getaways while I worked 70-hour weeks building up my first repair shop. I'd sworn I'd never be that blind again. But Camilla was different. At least, I thought she was. We'd met at a charity event 7 years after my divorce, when I was finally ready to trust someone again. She'd seemed genuine, warm, ambitious in a way that complemented my own drive. We'd built something together, or so I believed. I decided to watch. Just watch. Give her the benefit of the doubt while quietly confirming my suspicions. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe she was planning a surprise party. Maybe she had a perfectly reasonable explanation for secret hotel visits and expensive dinners. The following Saturday, Camilla mentioned she had a cake tasting scheduled for a big event. Some tech company's product launch party. Said she'd be gone most of the afternoon, maybe into the evening. She was wearing one of her nicer dresses, not her usual work clothes, but not quite date night attire either. That middle ground that could pass as professional, but was clearly chosen with care. I told her I had paperwork at the shop, quarterly tax documents that couldn't wait. She bought it without question. Why wouldn't she? I'd never followed her before. Never checked up on her. That's not who I was. Instead, I waited down the street in my truck, feeling like absolute garbage for doing it. My stomach was in knots. Part of me hoped she'd actually go to wherever she said she was going, prove me wrong, make me feel like an idiot for doubting her. That would have been preferable to what I was starting to suspect. She left around 2. I followed her, keeping several cars back, remembering techniques from a documentary I'd watched about private investigators. Stay far enough back that you're not obvious, but close enough that you don't lose them at lights. She didn't go to any bakery supply store or client meeting. She didn't head toward the Pearl District where most of the trendy venues were located. She drove straight to the Riverwalk area, parked in a garage that charged $20 an hour, and walked into a cafe where a man was waiting. He was tall, stylish in that way that comes from actually caring about clothes. Mid-30s maybe, with dark hair styled carefully, and a leather jacket that probably cost more than my truck payment. Even from a distance, I could see they weren't meeting for the first time. The way she touched his arm as she approached. The way he stood up immediately, pulling out her chair with practiced ease. The way she smiled at him, That specific smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months, maybe years. The smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes and showed all her teeth. The genuine one. I sat there for 2 hours, watching them through the window like some kind of stalker. They talked, laughed, leaned close over the small table. He ordered them wine. I could see the bottle, something red that the waiter handled like it mattered. She touched his hand. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. They looked at his phone together, heads close, and she laughed at something on the screen. When the check came, he paid. Insisted, from what I could see. Gentlemanlike. The kind of gesture that probably made her feel special. When they finally left, they didn't kiss goodbye. Too public, too risky. But the intimacy was worse than any kiss could have been. She touched his chest. He held her hand for a long moment. They looked at each other like they were the only two people in the world. Then she walked back to her car, and he walked in the opposite direction, and I sat there feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. I didn't confront her that night, or the next week. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. Needed to know if this was a one-time thing, a mistake she'd regret, or something deeper. Something planned. Through some careful questions to Camilla's assistant, Caitlin, a sweet kid fresh out of culinary school who had no idea she was helping me, I learned that Camilla had met someone at the San Antonio Food and Wine Festival back in the spring. A designer named Edward something. He'd been there showcasing his work for some fashion event that ran parallel to the food festival. Apparently, they'd hit it off immediately. Caitlin mentioned it casually, said how nice it was that Camilla had made such a good friend in the creative community. Friend. Right. I started tracking everything. Every consultation. Every delivery. Every networking event. I created a spreadsheet on my work computer, password protected, backed up to a secure cloud account. Dates, times, locations, amounts. I pulled every credit card statement I could access, our joint accounts, her business card that I was a secondary on, even our PayPal and Venmo histories. I even set up a separate cloud account and started documenting everything with photos, timestamps, locations. My phone became a surveillance device. My truck became a mobile observation post. The betrayal wasn't just that she was cheating. It was that she'd become a completely different person, and I'd been too busy keeping our lives afloat to notice. Or maybe I'd noticed and chosen to ignore it. The late nights she blamed on big orders. The weekends she spent at food festivals in Austin and Houston. The way she'd started dressing differently, wearing perfume I hadn't bought her, coming home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. 3 weeks into my surveillance, I followed them to a barbecue party at someone's ranch outside the city. It was a Saturday evening in late October, that perfect autumn weather when the temperature drops just enough to make you appreciate Texas. Golden light made everything look deceptively beautiful. The kind of evening we used to spend together as a family, grilling in our backyard while the kids played. Camilla had told me she was going to a pastry chef networking thing downtown, some kind of collaboration dinner where local chefs were supposed to share techniques. She'd even shown me the invitation on her phone, though now I realized she could have easily faked that. Instead, she was at this party, and Edward was introducing her to people as if she belonged to him. I'd followed them out Highway 281, past the city limits, onto a ranch property with a long gravel driveway. I couldn't get too close without being spotted, so I parked along the road with binoculars like some kind of low-budget spy. From my vantage point, I could see the whole setup. String lights hung between oak trees, a massive stone fire pit, people in expensive casual clothes drinking craft beer and wine. They were comfortable together. Natural. She laughed at his jokes, touched his face with an intimacy that made my chest hurt, leaned into him when they talked to other people. At one point, he wrapped his arms around her from behind while they watched someone attempt to flip something on a grill, and she just melted into him. They looked like a couple, because they were. To these people, to this crowd of creative types and fashion industry folks, Camilla and Edward were together. I was the fiction. I was the lie she told when she had to go home. That's when I realized this wasn't an affair. This was a whole separate life. I went home and spent the night in my office, going through everything again. Bank statements showed the pattern went back at least 8 months. Maybe longer. Some of the earlier charges were ambiguous enough that they could have been legitimate business expenses. Hundreds of unexplained charges. Meals at restaurants I'd never heard of. Hotels in San Antonio, Austin, Fredericksburg. Gifts. I found receipts for men's clothing, expensive cologne, leather goods. All on our joint accounts, mixed in with legitimate business expenses, so they'd be harder to spot. She'd been clever about it, spreading the charges out, keeping them below amounts that might trigger fraud alerts. But here's what killed me. Our anniversary was in there. Our 14th anniversary back in June. She'd taken me to dinner at our favorite steakhouse, given me a watch I'd mentioned wanting months before, told me she loved me, and that she was grateful for everything we'd built together. I'd believed her. I'd actually teared up a little, feeling lucky that we'd made it this far when so many marriages fell apart. And 2 days later, she'd charged a weekend at a bed and breakfast in Fredericksburg, a place she'd taken Edward. 2 days after celebrating our marriage, she was in some romantic German-themed inn with another man. I realized then that I didn't know this woman at all. Maybe I never had. Maybe the person I'd fallen in love with 7 years ago was as much a construction as the person she was pretending to be now. Maybe I'd been useful, a successful businessman who could provide stability and financial security while she built her own career. And now that she was established, now that her business was successful in its own right, maybe she didn't need me anymore. The next morning, I called my lawyer. His name was Robin. Yes, with a Y. His mother had been a fan of Robin Hood, and he'd handled my first divorce 12 years ago. He was expensive, but he was worth it. Sharp, strategic, and most importantly, he understood how angry I was and how to channel that anger productively. "Tommy," he said when he picked up, recognizing my number. "I was hoping I'd never hear from you in a professional capacity again. You and me both, Robin." I laid out everything. The evidence. The timeline. The money. I sent him access to my cloud account so he could review everything himself. Robin was quiet for a long moment after I finished. I could hear him typing, probably pulling up the documents. Then he said, "This is good. This is really good. Texas is a community property state, but we can argue for a disproportionate division based on fraud and waste of community assets." How much did she spend? I'd calculated it. Multiple times, actually double-checking every charge. Just over $47,000 in 8 months. That's just what I can prove came from joint accounts. There might be more from accounts I don't have access to. On the affair? On Edward. Hotels, dinners, gifts, trips. I have receipts for all of it. Another pause. "Tommy, I'm going to be straight with you. You have enough here to not just win the divorce. You have enough to make sure she walks away with almost nothing. Especially if we can prove she was planning to leave you and was burning through assets before filing. In Texas, the courts don't look kindly on that kind of behavior. We can also argue that her business, which she built during the marriage using community resources and funds, should be considered community property subject to division." "I want her out of my house," I said. My voice sounded cold even to my own ears. "I want full custody of the kids. I want the business protected. And I want her to understand what she's done. The revenge thing, I get it. But let's be smart about this. Let's be strategic. We'll file immediately, ask for temporary orders giving you possession of the house and temporary custody. We'll freeze the joint accounts so she can't drain them before the divorce is final. We'll subpoena her business records. And we'll make sure every penny she spent on this affair is documented and presented to the judge." Smart. Right. Strategic. But I wanted more than smart. I wanted her to feel what I felt. I spent the next week preparing. I talked to Caitlin again, this time more directly. Met her for coffee at a place across town where Camilla wouldn't see us. Told her I was concerned about some business expenses and needed to verify some dates. She was helpful, pulled up Camilla's calendar on her tablet, showed me the real schedule versus what Camilla had told me. Confirmed every lie. When I told Caitlin what was really going on, she looked horrified. "I had no idea," she said. "I thought she was just really busy. I thought Edward was just a friend from the industry." "Oh my God, Tommy, I'm so sorry. If I'd known." "You couldn't have known," I told her. She lied to everyone. I also talked to my business partner, Eric, who'd been my friend since college. We'd started the first repair shop together 15 years ago, back when we were young and stupid and thought hard work alone could make anything succeed. He'd been at my wedding to Camilla, had held my son when he was born, was practically family. "You knew?" I asked him over beers at a bar near our main shop. He looked uncomfortable, wouldn't meet my eyes. Stared at his beer bottle like it might have answers. "I suspected. Last month, I saw her at that new bar on Broadway with some guy. Didn't look like a business meeting. They were sitting in one of those corner booths, real close. I almost said something, but then I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was innocent. I didn't know how to tell you, man. How do you tell your best friend that his wife might be cheating?" "It's fine," I said. It wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. But Eric had been in an impossible position. Finally, I talked to Evelina, Camilla's best friend from culinary school. They'd been close for years, talked almost daily, went to restaurant openings together. This was risky, but I needed to know if Camilla had talked to anyone about Edward, if she'd confided in anyone about her plans. Evelina met me for coffee on a Wednesday afternoon, nervous, looking around like Camilla might appear at any moment. Tommy, I don't want to get in the middle of anything. I know you don't, but I need to know. Has Camilla talked to you about someone named Edward? Evelina's face told me everything. Her eyes widened, then she looked down at her latte, then back at me with something like pity in her expression. She's in love with him, Evelina said quietly, and those 4 words hit me like a physical blow. She told me 6 months ago. Said you're a good provider, but that you two grew apart. That Edward understands her creative side. That you only care about work and money, and building your business empire. That you don't really see her anymore, don't appreciate what she does. There it was. The justification. The narrative she'd built where I was the villain in her story, and Edward was her savior. The version where she was the victim of a loveless marriage instead of the person actively destroying our family. Did she tell you she never loved me? I asked. I needed to know. Needed to understand if our entire marriage had been a lie. Evelina looked away, clearly uncomfortable. She said marrying you was practical. That she cared about you, but was never in love with you. That she appreciated the stability and support you gave her, but that Edward is different. That Edward makes her feel alive. That he understands her art in a way you never could. I thanked her and left. Sat in my truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just breathing. Trying to process the idea that the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd built a life with, the mother of my children, had apparently never loved me back. That I'd been a means to an end. A stepping stone. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday night. The kids were at their grandparents', my parents, who'd agreed to take them for the night without asking too many questions. I'd planned it that way. Wanted to do this without the kids hearing, without traumatizing them more than necessary. They'd find out eventually, but not like this. Camilla came home late, told me she'd been working on a wedding cake for a Saturday event. A 5-tier monstrosity with sugar flowers and gold leaf that was taking forever to assemble. She probably had been, to be fair. She was still running her business, still maintaining the facade, still pretending she was the devoted wife and mother, while living an entirely separate existence. How was Edward's party last weekend? I asked. Casual. Like I was asking about the weather. She froze, halfway through taking off her jacket. Actually froze, like someone had hit pause on a video. What? The barbecue. Out at that ranch past the city limits. How was it? I watched her calculate. Saw her brain working, trying to figure out how much I knew, how she could spin it, whether she could still salvage this with another lie. Her hand was still caught in her jacket sleeve. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone, opened the cloud folder I'd created, showed her the photos. Her and Edward at the cafe, heads close together. At the barbecue, his arms around her. At the hotel downtown, walking in together. Timestamps, locations, everything documented with the precision of a prosecutor building a case. I've been documenting everything for a month, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I have every charge you've made on our accounts. Every lie you've told. Every place you've been when you said you were somewhere else. I have witness statements. I have your assistant's testimony. I have everything. The color drained from her face. Actually drained, like someone had pulled a plug. Tommy, I don't want to hear it. I've already filed for divorce. You'll be served tomorrow morning. My lawyer estimates you've spent $47,000 of our money on this affair. In Texas, that's fraud and waste of community assets. You're not getting the house. You're probably not getting primary custody. And you're definitely not getting half of anything. You're going to be lucky to walk away with 20% of the marital assets. You can't, she started, but I cut her off. I already did. There's a bag packed for you in the garage. Your clothes, your toiletries, the essentials. You can stay in a hotel tonight. After that, I don't care where you go. Maybe Edward has room for you. Maybe he'll take you in now that you're not a secret anymore. We'll find out, won't we? She tried to talk, tried to explain, told me I was being unreasonable, that I didn't understand, that our marriage had been dead for years anyway, that I'd driven her to this with my neglect, my obsession with work, my inability to see her as anything other than the mother of my children and the baker who occasionally made money. She said Edward appreciated her as an artist, as a woman, in ways I never had. She said she deserved to be happy. She said a lot of things. I didn't respond to any of it. Just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for her to finish. Then you should have divorced me, I finally said when she ran out of words. Instead of lying. Instead of stealing. Instead of pretending. Instead of making a fool out of me while you built your little fantasy life with your designer boyfriend. You should have had the courage to end this before you started something else. But you didn't. You wanted the stability I provided while you played out your romance novel. And now you're going to pay for that choice. She left that night, took the bag, got in her car, and drove away. I didn't watch. Just closed the door and locked it, and stood in the silent house feeling nothing at all. The kids came home the next day, and I had to explain that Mom was going to be living somewhere else for a while. They were confused, hurt. My daughter, 13 years old, smart as a whip, cried and asked what she'd done wrong. My son, 10, already trying to be the man of the house, just looked angry. Asked if this was his fault. If we were splitting up because of him. This has nothing to do with you, I told them both, holding them on our living room couch. This is between your mom and me. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault. Not even a little bit. But how do you explain adult betrayal to children? How do you tell them that their mother chose someone else? That she'd been lying to all of us for months? That the family they thought they had was never quite real? The divorce took 4 months. Robin was right. With the evidence I had, Camilla's lawyer couldn't negotiate much. We had photographs, bank statements, witness testimony, GPS data from her phone that she'd forgotten I had access to through our family plan. Her lawyer tried to argue that the money she'd spent was from her business earnings, but we proved that the accounts were joint and that she'd specifically used community funds. They tried to argue for 50-50 custody, but the judge wasn't impressed with a mother who'd been lying to her children for 8 months while conducting an affair. She got 20% of the marital assets after legal fees. I got the house, the business, primary custody. She got supervised visitation until she could prove stable housing and income. Every other weekend, and 1 evening a week for dinner. The judge actually lectured her from the bench about the importance of honesty and fidelity, about the sanctity of marriage and the welfare of children. It was almost satisfying. Almost. Edward, it turned out, wasn't interested in a ready-made family. 2 months into the divorce proceedings, he ended things with Camilla. Evelina told me later, we'd become unlikely friends through this whole mess, that he'd been cheating on Camilla with someone else the whole time. Some model from Houston. Apparently, Edward liked the excitement of affairs but not the reality of actual relationships. He liked the secret meetings and the forbidden romance, but when Camilla was actually available, actually single, and wanting a future with him, he lost interest. The fantasy was more appealing than the reality. Camilla moved into a small apartment on the south side of town, tried to rebuild her pastry business. But word had gotten around, San Antonio's a big city, but the small business community is tight. People knew what had happened. Wedding planners who'd worked with her for years started quietly dropping her from their vendor lists. Not because I asked them to. I never said a word to anyone. Just because that's how these things work. Brides didn't want the drama. Event coordinators didn't want to deal with the awkwardness. Her Instagram following dropped by half. Orders slowed to a trickle. She reached out a few times over those first months, trying to apologize, wanting to explain. Long text messages about how sorry she was, how she'd made a mistake, how she'd been confused and lost and didn't know what she was doing. Emails asking if we could talk, if we could try to be friends for the kids' sake. She even showed up at the house once, but I didn't answer the door. I never responded. What was there to say? She'd made her choices. She'd built a fantasy life with someone who'd never been real, and she'd burned down everything actual in the process. Sorry didn't fix that. Sorry didn't give our kids back their intact family. Sorry didn't return the $47,000. Sorry didn't erase 8 months of lies. The kids adjusted eventually. Kids do. They're more resilient than adults give them credit for. They see their mom every other weekend now. She tries, I'll give her that. Shows up on time, takes them to do fun things, never badmouths me in front of them. But the trust is gone. Our daughter told me last month that she doesn't tell her mom things anymore because mom lies. My son doesn't call her unless I remind him to. They're polite but distant. They love her because she's their mother, but they don't trust her anymore. I've been asked if I regret how I handled it, if I should have tried counseling, given her a chance to explain, been more forgiving. The answer is simple. No. She didn't make one mistake. She made thousands of small choices, every single day for 8 months, to betray our family. Every time she charged something to our account. Every time she lied about where she was going. Every time she smiled at me while planning to see him. Every time she kissed our children goodnight before sneaking off to be with Edward. You don't come back from that. Some things, once broken, should stay broken. My business is doing well. Better than well, actually. We opened 2 new locations this year. The kids are doing better. My daughter made honor roll. My son joined the soccer team. I'm learning how to be a single dad, how to braid my daughter's hair for school dances, how to talk to my son about feelings he doesn't quite understand yet. We have pizza nights on Fridays. We go hiking on Sundays. We're building something new. And sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and the kids are asleep, I still smell cinnamon rolls and feel sick. But less often now. Less often. Thank you for watching the video to the end. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. A playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to is now displayed on the screen. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.